Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of President Larry Bacow, Glenn Hutchins, and Henry Louis Gates Jr., it is my honor to welcome the 2022 Du Bois medalists. The Hutchins Center Honors traditionally begins with a prayer, and I'm honored to be asked to open this year's ceremony with a prayer. My name is Emmanuel Echampon. I'm the Ellen Gurney Professor of History and of African and African American Studies, and the Minister for Worship and Formation at Harvard Memorial Church. Let us pray. Lord God, we begin this award ceremony with you, for we know that without you, we can do nothing, and that everything that begins with you ends well. We thank you for the lives of our honorees, who have provided us with an occasion to gather to celebrate excellence and their contributions to African American culture and life. We acknowledge the privilege of our presence in this prestigious university called Harvard, and how it has lent its convening power and imprimatur to this award series, and the president of President Bacow, who has faithfully attended each award ceremony. We thank you, Lord God, for the leadership and vision of Henry Louis Gates Jr., for your word says that without vision or knowledge, the people perish. We thank you for Glenn Hutchins, and we pray that you continue to expand his borders, for you are the one who gives us strength to get wealth. At the center of our awards ceremony today are 7 individuals who have utilized the gifts and talents God placed in them to excel in writing, acting, sports, education, social justice, business, philanthropy, and public service. We pray that you will give them the strength to continue in this calling you have placed on them, and that they will be a model to many others, especially young people of color. We thank God for this audience. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus tells this parable of a king who prepared a wedding feast for his son, but none of the invited guests showed up. Your presence here today gives credence to the significance of this award ceremony. May we all leave this space inspired by today's proceedings and the presence of our Creator God, who gives good gifts to us all. Amen.
Thank you, Emmanuel. That was wonderful. I'm Glenn Hutchins, and on behalf of my wife, Debbie, who's sitting right here in the front row, I'd like to welcome you to the 2022 W.E.B. Du Bois Medal Ceremony, our first since 2019. Right? I can't truly express how meaningful it is to all of us, particularly me, and all of us on the stage, that you've come to join us today. It's been way too long a time since we were last together. So thank you very much for being here. I'd like to start by thanking all of today's presenters and readers who are gathered here in the front. You're a distinguished group, and we appreciate your taking the time to be with us today. Like Emmanuel, I want to welcome President Bacow, who has attended, as he said, and I want to underscore this, every single one of these ceremonies as president of the university. Larry, thank you for your support. We're sad that this will be your last as president, but we always have a seat in the front row for you right next to Adele. Okay? Next, I'd like to recognize the members of our National Advisory Board who were present, and as I call your name, Please stand and remain standing, and let's all hold our applause until the end. Shahara Ahmad Llewellyn, please stand up. Hold on, we'll get them all up here. Paul and Katie Butenweiser, Richard Cohen, Steve Cousins, Jeremy Henderson, Kay Madadi, Damond Martin, Ray McGuire. Come on, stand up, Ray. And Candace King-Weir. Thank you for all your support. Bravo. Next, I want to single out a group of young men who've come to almost every single one of these events, the Harvard men's basketball team. Where are you guys? They're somewhere back over here. There we go, right there in the middle. All right, good seats. Led by the inimitable Tommy Amaker, they've dominated the Ivies by winning 7 of the last 11 years. I will point out that the last time they won, 2019, was also the last time they attended one of these events. So I think that augurs well for the upcoming season. Thank you for coming. And Tommy, thank you for bringing them. I want to welcome all the Harvard students here today. Professor Gates and I strongly believe that we do this for you, and it's great to have you here. By the way, it is a sold-out house today, and so that your support and your interest in what we do is really very gratifying. We also have a bunch of high school students who Professor Gates will give a proper welcome to shortly. I just want to urge you not to forget to mention this event on your application when you apply to Harvard. It won't hurt you. One minor program change for today. Our dear friend Ellen Higginbotham cannot join us today, so we're just going to eliminate her reading, so you don't be confused if that doesn't happen according to what's on your program. As I survey this extraordinary group of medal recipients that we have on the stage today, I'm reminded, maybe I'm just nostalgic because we haven't done this for 3 years, I'm reminded of the awardees who preceded you here, a distinguished company which you are now joining. We're here today because you stand on the shoulders of giants. Previous Du Bois Medal winners include John Lewis, Sonia Sotomayor, Wale Soyinka, Charlene Hunter Galt, Oprah Winfrey, Quincy Jones, LL Cool J, Jesse Norman, Steven Spielberg, David Adichie, Henry Rossovsky, Ruth Simmons, and Anthony Appiah. Kareem, before you today, from the world of sports, medal recipients have included Muhammad Ali, David Stern, the 1966 Texas Western Miners men's basketball team, and Colin Kaepernick. Ray, leaders from the business community who also led in the community who have included Vernon Jordan, Ken Chenault, Ursula Burns, and our one recipient in the audience today, one Du Bois Medal recipient here, Richard Cohen. Laverne, creative geniuses who have preceded you include Ava DuVernay, Shonda Rhimes, Queen Latifah, and Steve McQueen. So, Deval, one of my college contemporaries like Ray, you follow in the footsteps of Eric Holder, Marion Wright Edelman, Donna Brazil, and Brian Stevenson. Not bad company, my friend. Chimamanda. Authors who came before you include Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou, Nadine Gordimer, and Derek Walcott. Aggie, you were preceded by great leaders in philanthropy like Darren Walker, Elizabeth Alexander, and the late Jennifer Oppenheimer, as well as collectors like Pam Joyner. And Betty, before you, actually, I don't think anybody came before you, but preceding you on this stage were Carrie Mae Weems, Carol Walker, Kahindi Wiley, and Carrie James Marshall. So, now it's time to induct all of you into this illustrious community. Skip, let's get this show on the road.
Thank you so much, Glenn, for your very kind words. Give it up for my friend, Glenn Hutchins. Good afternoon. Welcome back to the Hutchins Center Honors. My name is Henry Louis Gates, Jr. And I have the distinct pleasure of serving as the director of the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research, as well as teaching in the departments of English and the Department of African and African American Studies here at Harvard. It's been a long 3 years since we last gathered here at Sanders Theater for this shining ceremony. And we're thrilled at long last to be able to celebrate in person at our annual rite honoring excellence in and outstanding contributions to Black society and culture. As Glenn indicated, we have a supremely distinguished class of medal recipients this year, befitting the legacy of the great William Edward Burghardt Du Bois, Fisk University class of 1888, Harvard College class of 1890, the first African American to earn the PhD at Harvard in the year 1895. As a group, these honorands inspire us to face the challenges of our times with renewal, with resolve, with purpose. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, whose artistry as an athlete on a basketball court was in service of an even higher calling, of intellectual seeking and social justice, and whose own great uncle, the physician and Pan-Africanist Dr. John Alcindor, was an associate organizing the first Pan-African Congress in the history of the world in London with Dr. Du Bois. Isn't that amazing? Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, the gifted Nigerian writer who has reminded us that, quote, we should all be feminists and that no single story can ever capture the fullness of our humanity. Laverne Cox, the electrifying actress and LGBT. I said she was electrifying. You can see that works. The electrifying actress and LGBTQ advocate who broke barriers. Who broke barriers as the first openly transgender person to be nominated for a Primetime Emmy in an acting category, and who is a model of speaking truth to power. Agnes, the philanthropist and institution builder, who stood up for arts education in schools when budgets were being gutted, and who translated her own art collection into a campaign for reform in our criminal justice system. Raymond J. McGuire, a son of Harvard, who through his path-breaking leadership has transformed both Wall Street and the world of Black art with his 20-year chairmanship of the board of the Studio Museum of Harlem, which, with its new expansion, is poised to be the leading site for Black art in the whole wide world. Deval Patrick, the Chicago native who became the first and only Black governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And who took his Harvard education and turned it into a lifelong pursuit of ensuring that more of us have a full say in our democracy. And finally, last but not least, Betty Saar, a seminal figure in the history of African American art who has taught us new ways of seeing ourselves and new ways of seeing our world. Friends, give it up for all of our 2022 Du Bois medalists. Now, there's some other guests in the audience today, over 300 of them, whom I'd like you to welcome. Look around and you'll notice a sea of young faces here in Sanders. We're delighted to have with us over 300 high school students from 21 public and independent schools across Boston and Cambridge. Give it up for yourselves. I wish I could read out each school's name, but there's just too many of you. So you are our future. We know you, we know you stand at the ready to learn and to act for the good of our people. So students, please stand up so everyone can see you. Please stand up. Thank you for being with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, there's much work to do. In his magisterial history, Black Reconstruction in America, Dr. Du Bois wrote, and I quote, "Nations reel and stagger on their way. They make hideous mistakes. They commit frightful wrongs. They do great and beautiful things. And shall we not best guide humanity by telling the truth about all this, so far as that truth is ascertainable?" Du Bois also said in his 1905 speech at the dawn of the Niagara Movement, quote, "Either the United States will destroy ignorance or ignorance will destroy the United States." In the spirit of Dr. Du Bois, let us remind ourselves that Harvard's motto, Veritas, is not just a Latin ornament adorning the gates and halls of this august campus. It is a charge to each of us to uphold the truth everywhere, especially when that is uncomfortable and when that is inconvenient. We're living through a time unlike anything we've ever experienced. There are real open threats to democracy everywhere. Hatreds and phobias abound. White nationalist supremacy feels like it's coming for an awful lot of us. There have been grotesque and highly visible acts of violence against individuals and institutions. There is the insidious chipping away of our rights, the right to vote, to control our own bodies and identities, to live freely and without fear. Nowhere is this lurching menace more evident than in the battle taking place in our schools over curricula, over students' rights to learn and teachers' rights to teach, and over students' and teachers' right to be who they are. It is fear of change and difference, of having to give up some of their slice of the pie, that is trying to shut down dialogue and to stamp out difference. Ladies and gentlemen, this cannot stand. We must lift our voices in the service of a free and open society. Our society is far from perfect, but we must also protect the freedom to think and to express those thoughts without fear of censorship or cancellation. Our former colleague, Kwame Anthony Appiah, one of the foremost philosophers at work in the Academy today, wrote the following words, which I keep posted on my refrigerator, to remind me daily of their saliency and their truth, and I quote, "Despite the forces that would keep us socially and even geographically isolated from one another, you each have a reason to try to understand the other tribe, to figure out what its members believe, and to the extent that there are arguments involved, why they believe it. Democracy falters not when we disagree about things, but when we lose interest in trying to make sense of the other person's point of view. and in trying to persuade that person of the merits of our own. When we stop talking, even to people we know and people we like, because of political disagreements, we've abandoned the deliberative democratic project of governing the republic together. I'll quote another writer whose words have filled my classrooms for a generation, a person whom I miss dearly. Toni Morrison expressed her fear of censorship this way in the 2009 anthology called Burn This Book. And this is what she said: "The thought that leads me to contemplate with dread the erasure of other voices, of unwritten novels, poems whispered or swallowed, for fear of being overheard by the wrong people, outlawed languages flourishing underground, essayist questions challenging authority never being posed, unstaged plays, canceled films. That thought," she concludes, "is a nightmare." Friends, I've said it before, and I'm sorry I have occasion to say it again, but censorship in any of its forms is to art and expression as lynching is to justice. We absolutely must meet this moment with steadfastness and resolve. Convenings such as this one, where we hold up exemplars of our highest freedoms and ideals, are vital because they remind us of who we are at our best and in our core. It is a credit to the university, and especially to my friend, President Larry Bacow, for making the Hutchins Center Honors such a signal event at Harvard. Through President Bacow's leadership, we are at last facing the truths of our university's own history in order to learn and to advance. And I'm speaking, of course, of the committee that President Bacow convened on Harvard and the legacy of slavery under the leadership of Radcliffe's Dean Tomiko Brown-Nagin, which has produced a report revealing the agonizing depths of the university's entanglements with both slavery and Jim Crow. It also has galvanized the university's commitment of $100 million to implement the hard work of repair. And that is because of the foresight of that man sitting there, President Bacow. Give it up for our president. When W.E.B. Du Bois was a doctoral student in the history department in the 1890s, he wrote his dissertation on the history of the transatlantic slave trade. Its long title was The Suppression of the African Slave Trade in the United States, 1638-1871. It's a measure of Harvard's progress that it has finally caught up to where Dr. Du Bois was in 1895. Let me thank, yeah, you got to give it up for Du Bois, I mean, really. Let me thank Provost Alan Garber and Dean Robin Kelsey of the Division of Arts and Sciences, whose support of the scholarly mission of the Hutchins Center allows us to keep moving our field forward. The Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, Claudine Gay, and our AAAS colleague, the Dean of the Social Sciences, Lawrence Douglas Bobo, couldn't be with us here today, but their unflagging support is key to our success. I've had the pleasure of teaching at Harvard for 31 years, and there's been remarkable change in the ranks of both students and faculty. Du Bois was one of only a handful of black students when he matriculated here. No more. Over the last 50 years, that has profoundly changed, thanks especially to the efforts of a man named David Evans, who quietly and steadily did the difficult, detailed work alongside Dean William Fitzsimmons that has profoundly changed the composition of Harvard's student body. Please give it up for David Evans. You want to know how one person can make a difference? That man personally oversaw the admission of almost 7,000 black students who matriculated at Harlem. Fighting the revolution one admission folder at a time. A tremendous debt of gratitude is owed to my dear friends, Glenn and Debbie Hutchins. Thank you for making this event and all of our research and programming possible. Ladies and gentlemen, with no exaggeration, Glenn and Debbie are the most generous funders of research and program in African American studies since the field was established more than 50 years ago. Give it up for Glenn and Debbie. This event really wouldn't happen without months of hard work by the Hutchins Center's creative, relentless staff. I can't thank them enough for bringing the Hutchins Center Honors back to life after 3 years away. Special appreciation goes to the dynamic duo Matt Weinberg and Justin Sneed, who manage every single detail of this event, our fearless leader, Dr. Abby Wolf, the executive director of the Hutchins Center, and the person with whom I work closely every day, Amy Gosdanian, without whose wisdom, grace, and calm I, frankly, would be lost. Give it up for our team at the Hutchins Center. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today to celebrate these 7 remarkable individuals who are sharing the stage with Larry, with Glenn, and with me this afternoon. And now, on to the honors. Thank you so very much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Suzanne Blier, the Allen Whitehill Klaus Professor of Fine Arts and African American Studies. In short, I'm an art historian focused on the rich artistic world of Africa and her diasporas. It is my honor to introduce the path-forging artist Betty Saar. Early in her career, Betty Saar shouldered a plethora of professional identities as social worker, jewelry maker, costume designer, and printmaker. She emerged as a powerful visual storyteller, championing the sculptural idiom of assemblage to address core issues of racial prejudice, caricature, and injustice. She knits pieces of the broken world together in artful expressions of healing, a socially empowering, grounded art evoking a real-life caseload. Like a fine jewelry designer, Betty Saar's art is at once intimate, beautifully crafted, personal, and universal. She sutures the wounds of racism with an expert tailor sense of body-engaged fabric and design. Saar's 2019 work, Woke Up This Morning, The Blues in My Bed, speaks to her interest in both past and future. She transforms imagery with a printmaker's eye to negative and positive space, here of form in society in an enduringly political and visually powerful way. Betty Saar recalls seeing firsthand African art at Chicago's Field Museum and returns to this wellspring in her work. She engages complex African gods like the Yoruba messenger deity Eshu in her work Eshu the Trickster. This sculpture, like others, explores the paradoxes and complexities of communication and power. How can a messenger god also be a trickster? Saar shows that caricature functions in similar ways. She takes the maligning harm wrought by generations of racial caricatures and messages of hate falsely circulated as humor. She then distills, domesticates, and re-releases these motifs into the world as new messages of beauty, peace, and empowerment. With her 1990 to 93 sculpture, Gree Guardian, she gathers up the detritus of found objects, wire, candles, stones, glass, cord, feathers, and reassembles them, much like Dahomey Boccio sculptures that once served as protective guardians against evil, enslavement, theft, and harm. Betty Saar repositions them into an elegant curio cabinet of both personal and universal expression. This too draws us in to look closely and bear witness to both the harmful memories involved and the calm that somehow, once harnessed, bring a sense of peace. In one of her more famous works, she handed Aunt Jemima a shotgun to balance out her broom, providing protection from future harm. Travel through time and the unfolding experiences are never far removed from Betty Saar's impassioned vision. In her 1969 Black Girl's Window, we meet a hauntingly beautiful young Black girl, her face and hands pressed against the window, staring out at us and the world. Details of moon and crescents and stars and suns speak to time, cosmology, astrology, and a young girl's hopes and concerns about what the future will hold, framed by what she also sees outside below. We see as well in her work how she draws us in and takes our breath away as we confront this truth with her. In Gliding into Midnight from 2019, we witness the not-so-silent passage of a nighttime canoe bearing the raised hands of humans transported to another world, a packed slave ship reflected on the floor surface below, haloed by indigo blue. Past and futures interconnect. What stands out in Betty Saar's remarkable 60-year oeuvre is the depth of her assemblage interest, both as a technique for joining disparate parts visually and as a potent statement of how society itself must be addressed in all of its diversity and richness and complexity. Through her remarkably astute eye and brilliant visual clarity, she urges us to engage these goals as well. Betty Saar, for your long career in transforming pain and suffering into powerful art forms that do the hard work of healing and transformation, the Hutchins Center recognizes you with the W.E.B. Du Bois Award.
Well done. Why don't you shake your hand as you put the thing around it? May I?
Well, here I am. California gal out in the West Coast, East Coast, all over. That's what art can do for you. It can take you all kinds of places. And the kind of art I do comes from all kinds of places. It's assemblage art, things that people throw away, things that I find in the trash, things that I find in secondhand stores or antique stores. And I put it all together to say what I don't know, but that I love putting it together. That's assemblage art. My grandmother lived in Watts, California, nearby where Simon O'Deal built the Watts Towers. And that was an influence on me of making something out of nothing. And that's the kind of art I do. I find things, I paint, of course, I draw, of course, but I put it together, I put odd things together to say something, odd things together to say how I feel about things, odd things together to present here, and I call it art. Other people call it art too, so that's okay. As long as they pay for it, it's great. Yes, yes. To be able to do something that you love, to make something and get paid for it and respected for it. And also, I think some of my art, not all of it, affects people. The liberation of Aunt Jemima was my statement about racism in our country. Yes, yes. Bad things happen, but you can be creative around it. And here I am standing before you, pleased to be a recipient. My congratulations to the other people. Thank you for being part of our community. And I think that's it. I think I said it all.
Good afternoon. I'm Doug Elmendorf, the Dean of Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and it is my great honor and privilege to present the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal to my colleague and friend, the Honorable Deval L. Patrick. I'm very proud to say that Deval Patrick is now a professor of the practice of leadership at the Kennedy School and the co-director of our Center for Public Leadership. He joined us this past January and brings to his work at Harvard decades of experience as a principled and effective leader in the service of others, partly in the private sector and most notably in the public sector. Deval Patrick is probably familiar to most of us as the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts from 2007 to 2015, the 71st governor of this state, but the first African-American governor and the first to be sworn in on a Bible from the Amistad. Even before becoming governor, Deval Patrick had a resume that can't be beat. He has 2 Harvard degrees, an AB in English, which should make you happy, Skip, and a JD from Harvard Law School. He was a Rockefeller Fellow in Sudan between college and law school, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights in the U.S. Department of Justice, where he led the investigation into the plague of black church burnings. A staff attorney for the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, and a successful lawyer in private practice. But it is what rests at the foundation of that resume that brings us here today with him. Deval Patrick's life and work have been guided by a wonderful piece of wisdom from his grandmother: hope for the best and work for it. That is exactly what we try to teach our students and why they are so lucky to have Professor Patrick on our faculty now. And I feel so lucky myself to be able to work with Deval and to learn from him. He is the sort of leader and person that I am striving to be. Deval Patrick was born in Chicago, where he was raised primarily by his mother, Emily Wintersmith Patrick, and his grandparents in public housing. His talents were noted early, and at the age of 14, he earned a scholarship from the Boston-based organization A Better Chance to attend Milton Academy. At Milton and then at Harvard College, he was exposed to life stories and experiences far different from those he had grown up with. And it does not seem a stretch to think that those early years helped to form him into a leader with strong principles, who nonetheless values bridge building to get to the heart of problems and to solve them. As governor, Deval Patrick focused on public schools, healthcare and criminal justice reform, as well as clean energy and biotechnology, industries in which Massachusetts leads the country. Since leaving the governorship, he has worked to strengthen democracy, especially by amplifying voices that have not always been welcome in the public square. For example, he has served as a co-chair of the American Bridge 21st Century Foundation and its Bridge Together initiative, which supports grassroots organizations that broaden political participation and sustain political engagement beyond Election Day. This notion of connecting and bridging comes up again and again in Deval Patrick's life and work and what we all have seen publicly and what I now see every day. He said, and I quote, "I was taught by my grandparents that everybody is entitled to a respectful hearing, that everyone is entitled to be treated with dignity, and that everyone is deserving of at least an effort at understanding." He went on, "My grandparents were refugees from the Jim Crow South who were not afforded that kind of deference and respect, and yet they taught me those lessons," unquote. Although he has reached great heights, Deval Patrick is actually very down to earth. He is a prime mover in our country's political life, but he is also happy practicing the art of beekeeping at his house in the Berkshires. Indeed, the house that he and his very accomplished wife, Diane, who is here with us today, own in the Berkshires happens to be only 12 miles from W.E.B. Du Bois's birthplace in Great Barrington. Deval is inspirational and profoundly moving in the spotlight, and he is warm, kind, and funny up close. This extraordinary public leader is extraordinarily human. And so, in recognition of his lifetime of principled and effective public leadership and his ongoing work to make this country a better place for all its citizens, we present Deval Patrick with the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal. Well done.
My, oh my. Doug, first of all, thank you for that incredibly generous introduction. And I loved everything about it except the part about the towering reference, which feels a little, makes me a little self-conscious, even more so in the presence of you-know-who. I would have felt honor enough to be in the company of these honorees, in the same room as these honorees, and to receive a medal in honor of and in the name of W.E.B. Du Bois, a towering, prophetic leader who had the bravery and integrity to see things as they are and still imagine what America could be and to reach for it. That, to me, is both the genius and the frustration of America, that we can reinvent, refound ourselves from time to time. That we have to may be the frustration, but we can do it, and we must. I hear from time to time people tell me today, young people, who make that mistake so many of us do of confusing cynicism with sophistication, who feel like everything is broken, and treat me sometimes like I am naive for being optimistic. and I tell them that I would betray my grandparents and their grandparents if I weren't still trying to imagine a better tomorrow and reach for it. And so, in that spirit, I am honored by this honor, and I hope that I continue in whatever role I have or will have, and as a human being, to continue to do the work to produce the outcome justice demands. Thank you.
Hello, I am Robin Bernstein. I teach in the Department of African and African American Studies and in Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies, and I am the chair of the Program of American Studies here at Harvard. Today, it is my extraordinary honor to present the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal to Laverne Cox. What does it mean to be a first? Laverne Cox, actress, producer, writer, activist, feminist, has achieved so many firsts. She is the first openly transgender actress to be nominated for a Primetime Acting Emmy, the first trans woman of color to have a leading role on a mainstream scripted television series, which is, of course, I don't even have to tell you, you're making this so easy. It is Netflix's Orange is the New Black. She is the first openly trans person to appear on the covers of Time magazine, British Vogue, Cosmopolitan, Essence magazine, among so many others. And today, she is the first openly transgender recipient of the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal. As W.E.B. Du Bois knew, to be a first, to break through a barrier, is a triumph. It is an achievement to honor and celebrate. It deserves a medal. But what matters even more is what and who comes next. A second, a third, 100th. It is here in her commitment to the collective that Laverne Cox truly soars. In Orange is the New Black, which ran from 2013 to 2019, Laverne Cox played Sophia Burset, a trans prisoner at a minimum security women's prison in Connecticut. The series made visible the brutalities of the prison industrial complex in characters who were, by television standards, exceptionally diverse. The role made her famous, but it also, very importantly, made trans identity visible in a new way to millions of people. For 7 seasons, Cox played Sophia with compassion and charm, wit and pain. Most of all, she played Sophia as a singular, unforgettable individual who demanded to be seen in all her beautiful complexity and on her own terms. For millions of viewers, Sophia was a first, the first transgender character they felt they knew, maybe the first transgender character they loved. And in Sophia, many trans women, especially Black trans women, saw someone like themselves on TV for the first time. Visibility matters. When Laverne Cox was featured on the cover of Time magazine in 2014, she said, "We are in a place now where more and more trans people want to come forward and say, 'This is who I am.' And more trans people are willing to tell their stories. More of us are living visibly and pursuing our dream visibly." Elsewhere, she said, "My life changed when I realized I deserved to be seen, to dream, to be fully included, always striving to bring my full humanity." This is exactly the gift she has given to so many. Laverne Cox inspires others, trans and not, Black and not, to dream, to share our full humanity on our own terms. And speaking of gifts, if you're looking for something to give the little trans girl in your life, or any child of any gender, or an adult, you might consider giving the gift of a Laverne Cox Barbie doll. This is a real thing. A Barbie doll that, quote, dazzles in a triple threat ensemble featuring a deep red tulle gown gracefully draped over a silver metallic bodysuit. Who wouldn't love that? From television to toy stores, Laverne Cox shares her vision for a better world. In an interview, she quoted another Du Bois medalist, Cornel West, saying he, quote, reminds us that justice is what love looks like out in public. And I think if we have love for transgender people and love for people who are disenfranchised, that love will manifest in public policy and how we treat people and give them housing, health care, employment. Trans people need a lot of love out in public right now. Cox's activism spreads love. She co-produced a documentary, Free Cece, about a Black trans woman who was imprisoned after she defended herself against a transphobic attack. With the support of activists, Cece McDonald was released early, and when she walked out of prison, Laverne Cox was among those to greet her. It is no wonder that the Black feminist thinker Bell Hooks called Laverne Cox a goddess for justice. Laverne Cox wants us to join her. When she visited Harvard in 2014, she said, "Students have the potential to be the leaders of tomorrow and to affect policies that might help or harm transgender people." And that goes for the hundreds of students in this room right now. In an interview about her life during the pandemic, Laverne Cox recounted some self-talk that would lift her up when she was feeling down. She said that when she found herself walking down a path of unproductive self-criticism, she would say, "You've accomplished so much. You've grown so much. So many trans people have said their lives are better because of you. I stand in the mirror and I say, Laverne, you should be proud." Indeed, Laverne, You should be proud. First and always, in honor of the lives you have made visible and better through your unyielding advocacy for trans people and for trans women of color in particular, we recognize you with the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal.
Lord have mercy. I arrived here insanely nervous, and as I sat there, thank you so much, Professor Bernard, for those incredible remarks. I started crying. Oh, I'm deeply overwhelmed by this moment for so many reasons. And I have so much to say, and there's so much on my mind. But I want to say this. Language is also a place of struggle. I was just a young girl coming slowly into womanhood when I read Adrienne Rich's words. This is the oppressor's language, yet I needed to talk to you. This language that allowed me to get a graduate degree, to write a dissertation, to speak in interviews has the scent of oppression. Language is also a place of struggle. We are wedded in language, have our being in words. Language is also a place of struggle. Dare I speak to oppressed and oppressor in the same voice? Dare I speak to you in a language that moves beyond the boundaries of domination, that will not hold you in, fence you in, or bind you? Language is also a place of struggle. The oppressed struggle in language to recover ourselves, to reconcile, to reunite, to renew. Our words are not without meaning. They are an action, a resistance. Language is also a place of struggle. Bell Hooks wrote those powerful words in her book, Yearning, Race, Gender, and Cultural Politics, over 30 years ago, and we lost Bell Hooks last December. And still devastated by it, and it was really important for me, and in this moment, to bring her words, to bring her work into this space. She was a scholar who was unprecedented in her courage to speak truth to power. I discovered her work. Oh, girl. When I discovered Bell Hooks' work in college over 30 years ago, it changed my life. I came to critical consciousness reading her words, and I know that I would not be the person I am today if it weren't for her work and so many elements of what she speaks about and writes about many years before the brilliant Kimberly Crenshaw gave us the term intersectionality. Shout out to Black feminists. Years before Kimberly Crenshaw gave us the term intersectionality, Bell Hooks gave us the phrase imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy to denote the interlocking systems of oppression that we exist under. I like to add to that cis-normative, heteronormative, imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. And Bell was so committed to for herself, always critically interrogating the way in which she entered cis-normative and heteronormative, imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. She was aware that she and that all of us have the capacity to become oppressors. One of my favorite things that Bell said is that we do not need men for patriarchy. Oh yes, each and every one of us has the capacity to be oppressors, and she always encouraged us to think critically and to always live in the space of self-interrogation around ways in which we can become oppressors, and she was a love warrior. Bell said that without justice, there can be no justice without love. And as we heard earlier, Dr. Cornel West reminds us that justice is what love looks like in public. Just like tenderness is what love feels like in private. And I always like to remind people of that because I believe in these troubling times that we exist in, these times when I feel like when we are so siloed in our media ecosystems that we're often preaching to the choir, when I think about the corrupt influence of money in our politics, money that keeps us from having the 90% of people in this country want, background checks for guns, but we can't have that happen because of money in politics. The majority of Americans want so many things, but we have legal bribery in this country. And that legal bribery keeps so many people from moving forward and keeps so much justice from happening. And we have to rise up against that. We have to change the systems. But when I think about love, justice being what love looks like in public, I think that, what would it look like if our public policies began to reflect that really and truly? And we have to get money out of politics and out of our moving beyond. Now, bell hooks would always remind all of us, particularly Black women, to get your money right. Get your money right. But she said there was a difference between that and materialism, between that and having market-driven values. There are other values. And when she talked about love, when Cornel West talks about love, it is not a sentimental love. And I love Brené Brown's definition of love. Now, Brené Brown read her bell hooks. When many times I talked to Bell on the phone and we talked about Brené Brown. She's like, she's read her bell hooks. If you have not read your bell hooks, you must read your bell hooks. I have to tell this story. In 2015, Bell Hooks opened the Bell Hooks Institute in Berea, Kentucky, and she invited me to be the first guest at the Bell Hooks Institute. And there were many people in her life who said that they could not attend that opening of her institute because I would be there and that Laverne Cox is an abomination. Oh yes. Berea, Kentucky is the Bible Belt. And Bell Hooks had me at the opening of her institute anyway. And that moment was a reminder for her and for all of us that when we stand for justice, sometimes we have to let go of people, places, and things in our lives that do not serve us standing. That do not serve us standing in solidarity with each other across difference. Brené Brown says about love that we cultivate love when we allow our most vulnerable and authentic selves to be deeply seen and known and honor the offering of that connection with trust, respect, kindness, and affection. Love is not something we give or get. It's something we nurture and grow, a connection that can only exist between individuals when it exists within each of them. We can only love others as much as we love ourselves. Shame, blame, disrespect, betrayal, and the withholding of affection damage the roots from which love grows. Love can only survive these injuries when they're acknowledged, healed, and rare. Think about all of those elements of love that Brené talks about, not just for our interpersonal lives, but for our public lives, for our workplace cultures, our corporate cultures, our politics. Trust, respect, kindness, and affection. not something we give or get, something we nurture and grow. It's a practice. Love is something we cultivate and practice. And in the face of so many hardships, we're here in Massachusetts, and earlier this year, the Boston Children's Hospital got bomb threats. Bomb threats for providing gender-affirming care for trans children. Trans youth are under attack in state legislatures all over the country. I'm sorry, I gotta say all this. This year alone, over 250 pieces of anti-LGBTQ legislation has been introduced in state legislatures all over the country. Many of those bills signed into law, affecting the ability of trans girls to play in school sports and the ability of trans youth to access gender-affirming health care. We should be reminded that with the overturning of Dobbs, all of our access to health care is threatened. I would not be here, the woman that I am today, if I did not have bodily autonomy, the access over what I get to do with my body when I get to do it. And every time you hear a pundit saying that they're performing surgeries on children, that's not happening. Every time you hear the misinformation that puberty blockers are dangerous, tell people, let them know that puberty blockers have existed for over 40 years, over 4 decades. And initially, puberty blockers were prescribed to non-transgender children for precocious puberties and were found to be safe. If these puberty blockers are safe for non-trans youth, they should be safe for trans youth. It's misinformation, it's propaganda, and it is threatening the lives and the existence of trans kids all over this country. We have to push back against that, and we have to do it with love. We have to be love warriors. It is my hope that I be a vessel for love today in this moment, be a love warrior the way Cornel West invites us all to be, and I invite all of you to be vessels of love, to be love warriors in your life, to fight for that justice that in public, just like tenderness feels like in private. Oh God, I want us to all be vessels of love and empathy for ourselves and each other. Thank you so much, Harvard. Thank you so much, everyone. It was an incredible honor. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tommy Shelby, and I'm a professor here at Harvard in the philosophy department and in the Department of African and African American Studies, where it is my distinct pleasure and honor to be its chair. I'm going to read a passage from Du Bois, from a book of his from 1940 called Dusk of Dawn, an essay toward an autobiography of a race concept. It is difficult to let others see the full psychological meaning of caste segregation. It is as though one looking out from a dark cave in the side of an impending mountain sees the world passing and speaks to it, speaks courteously and persuasively, showing them how these entombed souls are hindered in their natural movement, expression, and development, and how their loosening from prison will be a matter not simply of courtesy, sympathy, and help to them, but aid to all the world. One talks on evenly and logically in this way, but notices that the passing throng does not even turn its head, or if it does, glances curiously and walks on. It gradually penetrates the minds of the prisoners that the people passing do not hear, that some thick sheet of invisible but horribly tangible plate glass is between them and the world. They get excited, they talk louder, they gesticulate. Some of the passing world stop in curiosity. these gesticulations seem so pointless. They laugh and pass on. They still either do not hear at all or hear but dimly. And even what they hear, they do not understand. Then the people within may become hysterical. They may scream and hurl themselves against the barriers, hardly realizing in their bewilderment that they are screaming in a vacuum unheard, and that their antics may actually seem funny to those outside looking in. They may even here and there break through in blood and disfigurement and find themselves faced by a horrified, implacable, and quite overwhelming mob of people frightened for their very own existence. Thank you.
What a pleasure it is to be amongst you all today, in person, on this landmark occasion. Thank you, President Bacow, Professor Gates, Glenn Hutchins, and all those at the Hutchins Center who've sustained this great institute over the past few years and have made this event possible. My name is Sarah Elizabeth Lewis. I am fortunate to teach in the departments of African and African American Studies and History of Art and Architecture here at Harvard. It is an honor and a rare gift to be able to offer this tribute to the extraordinary Agnes Gund. President Emerita of the Museum of Modern Art, patron, philanthropist, icon, none of these descriptors do justice at all to this phenomenal woman whom we all call Aggie, her one-name moniker, even on the most formal of occasions in the world of art and culture. Others come to mind: paragon, champion. Her ethos, what unites all of her work, is to honor the role of art and culture for challenging our notion of who counts and who belongs in society, and to ensure, as she has put it, that access to the world shaped by art and culture is a right and not a privilege. Aggie has long seen the extraordinary in the overlooked. She looks farther, deeper than others around her. It has made her a visionary as a collector and an institution builder. Most recently, as just one example, she made the transformative decision to allow the proceeds of $165 million from the sale of her Roy Lichtenstein painting, Masterpiece, to create the Art for Justice Fund in partnership with the Ford Foundation and Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors to support criminal justice reform and arts-related programming focused on education and social justice. As Elizabeth Alexander said, one of the most remarkable feats of that act was, quote, to lay bare wealth and privilege. Most people who have it pretend like they don't have it. And she said, Aggie said, I have this, and I want it to go to work, and I want it to be so much bigger than one painting. Born into extraordinary privilege and power, Aggie is driven in the work of culture, in her work as a moral compass in the world of philanthropy, giving her fortune away for the greater good to ensure that she no longer remains the face of what power can mean in the United States. This recent act was not only remarkable, it was radial. It was, as Ford Foundation President Darren Walker said, a way to raise awareness among a community of art collectors that they can use their influence and their collections, even, to stand up for what is right and to find ways to support deserving initiatives anew. It presented a loving challenge to the actions of her philanthropic colleagues asking, what do you have? And what can you do better, perhaps, with it? Now, many saw this as unprecedented, yet it is, in fact, just another example of her long-standing visionary work. In 1977, she founded Studio in a School, the impactful model-setting nonprofit, as a response to budget cuts, as we have heard, that virtually eliminated arts classes from New York City public schools. For over 45 years, this organization has been largely responsible for sustaining arts education in that great city. Today, the organization has enriched the lives of 1 million students. For her work, Aggie has received many honors, and these include the Carnegie Medal of Philanthropy, the Getty Medal, the National Medal of Arts from Bill Clinton, the highest award given to artists and patrons in the United States, and the Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg Woman of Leadership Award from the Dwight Opperman Foundation. This final award was given to Aggie from its namesake, the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, at the Library of Congress in 2020. About this Du Bois Medal, as I understand it, Aggie is tremendously honored in a very unique way. If I could guess why, it's because she's long been in the position of being one of the very few people with power and privilege who are themselves not Black, who fully understand the significance of honoring Black culture as American culture in the United States. W.B. Du Bois himself anticipated the need for an Agnes Gund long before she arrived. In his debate with Elaine Locke about the function of art for a more just society, he argued that art for art's sake was not enough, given the stakes of racial contestation. Du Bois sensed the great urgent imperative to see the role of art and culture for countering myths of inferiority and the political realities of racial oppression and domination. It would lead him to argue in his 1926 speech turned essay, The Criteria of Negro Art, that, quote, all art is propaganda and ever must be. Art, as he saw it, was inseparable from the quest and the call for truth. The guiding principles that have shaped Aggie's impactful practices of collecting and leadership and philanthropy in the arts were that of Du Bois. What message is being sent when a museum does not have enough representations of, say, women on the walls when there's an artist like Betty Saar practicing in the world? What does it mean to not have a Carrie James Marshall in the collection on the walls of, say, the Museum of Modern Art? Aggie is fearless in using her voice, stating what other people often will not. She will support and celebrate an institution and in the same breath make clear that she wants to know when that institution is going to hire their first Black curator, their first Latino curator, start exhibiting the work of indigenous art. Ann Temkin, chief curator of the Museum of Modern Art, made the impact of Aggie's cultural leadership quite clear when she said, quote, we are what we are, and without Aggie could not be. And I think it's true not only for the Museum of Modern Art, it's true for New York City, it's true for the United States, it's true for the world beyond art museums. Now, I feel I owe Aggie an apology. She cringes about being celebrated in public. She probably is right now, but now you all know why. She cares about celebrating the creative work of others far more than speaking about herself. When she became the reluctant subject of the film Aggie, directed by her daughter Kat Gund, she agreed, but kept saying, I just hope the film will not be seen by too many people. Aggie knows that the significance of power and privilege is to be of service to the greater good, even those whom she'll never know. This was made vivid for me one day in 2017 when I was scheduled to meet with Aggie for a meal. And in full disclosure, I should say I'm fortunate to be able to have her as a dear friend after meeting her 20 years ago when I curated at the Museum of Modern Art. I'm so grateful for her steadfast and constant support. She came into the restaurant and told me that she had just made the decision to sell the Roy Lichtenstein painting. Instead of discussing this initiative, she instead wanted to hear about my students here at Harvard in the newly created Vision and Justice course that I had started to teach. And I showed her a publication they had created in which they analyzed artworks that showed the impact of Supreme Court decisions. I'll never forget how she sat there in that restaurant asking questions about all of the images, poring over literally every page. Aggie represents the best in all of us. When others relax, she presses onwards. She's rigorous, she's always read broadly, she reads tough works, she's intolerant of the kind of bias and hatred that is so visible in this country at this time. It's an orientation to life inspired and continued by her multiracial, I should emphasize, family. So it's perhaps no surprise that you cannot find a more rights-based, loving, supportive, mercy-oriented filmmaker than in her daughter, Kat Gund, who is here with us tonight. Her son, Tenzin, a freshman here at Harvard, is here as well. And I should say, Aggie herself came to study art history here at Harvard, receiving her master's degree. She was also born in Cleveland, a fact that she would not want me to forget before I close. But the question we all have after meeting her and getting to know her is this: where did Agnes Gund come from? If she did not exist in this world, we would have had to invent her. When she does come to the podium, I ask that we all give her the gift of our time, because I know we all want to hear from her. Please join me in celebrating the 2022 recipient of the W.B. Du Bois Medal, Agnes Gund.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm very grateful for you for your kind introduction and our long-standing friendship. I am especially pleased that you've agreed to MC our Studio in the School Gala, which is celebrating 45 years of working with the schools. Thank you so much for what you've said. I'm humbled and to be recognized in this way alongside this incredible group of people. Truly, it is among the great joys of my life to receive the W.E. Du Bois Award here with all of you. My thanks to Skip, Glenn, and Debbie, and everyone at the Hutchins Center. Harvard means so much to my family, and some of my fondest memories were studying here and learning to look at art from a wonderful professor like Conrad Oberhuber, who taught me to look at drawings in a whole new way. It's such a delight that my grandson Tenzin is now a freshman here, and I want to thank him and my daughter Catherine, who are in attendance tonight. I was first compelled to take a stand against inequality in the criminal justice system after reading Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, Brian Stevenson's Just Mercy, and watching Ava DuVernay's documentary 13th. I know Ava quite deservedly received this award in 2017. Like many others, her work moved me so profoundly. Immediately upon watching the film, I called Darren Walker at the Ford Foundation and told him we needed to do something. A plan was hatched, and I sold a painting for Roy Lichtenstein's school entitled Masterpiece, as Sarah's told you, and in the founding of the Art for Justice, a time-limited fund in partnership with the Ford Foundation, Helen Wang and Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. With support from Ford, every cent contributed by donors reaches grantees. Art for Justice concentrates on 3 major policy areas: bail reform, that reduces the number of people needlessly detained in jail, and there's so many of those people. Sentencing reform that eliminates excessive and disproportionate punishment of young people and people of color, and the creation of a meaningful re-entry opportunities for formerly incarcerated individuals to support themselves and their family. It aligns artists, advocates, and allied donors to transform the criminal legal system and create empathy in visiting a future what shared safety looks like for all. Through the work of grantees, the fund seeks to end mass incarceration and shift the narrative around criminal justice reform through art. We believe those with lived experiences with the criminal legal system are often best positioned to imagine a justice system that treats people with dignity and compassion. Therefore, formally incarcerated and directly impact artists and advocates must have the support and the allyship that they need to lead this movement. At the core, Art for Justice is a discretion decarceration fund against the backdrop of consequential policy outcomes such as the reversal of Roe versus Wade. The fund also embraces intersectional grant-making to address laws that further punish and criminalize the most vulnerable. Our goal includes the following: aid to reduce mass incarceration by 20% in 4 priority states, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, and Louisiana, over the life of the fund. Make visible the human dimension of mass incarceration. Educate Americans about mass incarceration and its links to racial bias. Build the public will for further reforms of our criminal justice system, and garner support for interconnected social justice issues such as immigrant detention and reproductive justice to advance a more robust and inclusive democracy. I'm almost finished. I'm proud to say that to date we have funded more than 175 advocates, artists, and organizations, garnered support for some 300 individual donors, raised more than $25 million in addition to the first $100 million, awarded over 300 grants to criminal justice reform organizations and art projects in states across the country, approximately $105 million, including $59 million to BIPOC individuals and organizations, and what Laverne Cox was talking about, $27 million to Justice Impact people and organizations led by Justice Impact people, and $50 million to women and organizations led by women. This is an area that is really, to my mind, very, very important because women are often incarcerated for less than what we all do in life. Now in its 6th year, Art for Justice seeks to leave behind a lasting legacy. By leveraging our partnerships and impact, we elevate the power of art to end mass incarceration. A4J embodies a model within art because the very means by which justice is secured, inspiring future reforms reform efforts while building a foundation for lasting change. I can say without hesitation that we are at such a pivotal moment in social justice reform. It is my hope that the momentum that has been created can continue and we can help shape a more just world. Thank you very much.
You ready, Ray? Ray McGuire is a titan of Wall Street, whose 4-decade career is the stuff of legend. From a start as an entry-level associate, he rose to the top of Morgan Stanley, then Merrill Lynch. He helped to found the enormously successful firm Wasserstein Perella, and he finished his career as head of banking at Citibank, serving in that role for 13 years, reportedly the longest tenure in the history of Wall Street. He became a trusted advisor to CEOs and boards, as well as central banks and sovereigns worldwide. And he accomplished all of this as the first African American to occupy each and every role he had. Now that is a career worthy of the Du Bois Medal, but it does not give us a complete picture of Ray McGuire. Let me explain. In the fall of 1975, Raymond J. McGuire of Dayton, Ohio, arrived at Harvard for his freshman year. He was clearly a superstar in the making. He was brilliant, charismatic, elegant, and worldly. He cut a wide swath on a campus chock full of extraordinarily talented young people. Like many freshmen, I know we have some in the audience today, he found himself at a fulcrum moment in his life, balancing between where he had come from and where he was going. Where he came from, his backstory was compelling. He was raised in Dayton, Ohio, by the formidable Letha McGuire, a single mother with a brood of 3 sons and usually a half-dozen foster children. Ray's mother was a social worker who supplemented her income with jobs at the local shoe shop and the 10-cent store. That's right. In other words, she worked 3 jobs and raised 9 children, essentially. Ray himself worked making boxes in the basement of the dress shop on Main Street, as a day laborer at the construction site at the local Air Force Base, and as an orderly at the hospital. The first person in his family to graduate from college, Ray walked 1.5 miles to school before later being bussed out of the community. When he was in 4th grade, his mother was called in for a meeting by the teacher, who explained that Ray had read every book she had selected for him from the library, and she strongly advised that he go to a better school. He soon got a scholarship from the Miami Valley School and later one from Hutchins, where he became captain of the basketball team and school president. At Harvard, ever the avid reader, Ray studied English and American literature. To this day, the bookshelves in his home feature the complete works of Shakespeare, Samuel Johnson, and William Faulkner, all of which he has read, and none of which I've ever seen in the bookcase of any other banker. Over the ensuing decades, as he rose to fame in finance, after Harvard College, he took Harvard Business School and Harvard Law School by storm, becoming the only member of the 4-H Club, Hotchkiss plus 3 Harvards. And after that, he set out to conquer Wall Street. Over the ensuing decades, as he rose to fame in finance, Ray remained at his core the son of a social worker who went to school on scholarships and loved the humanities. A richly dimensionalized person, he became a committed philanthropist, a pioneering art collector, and a mentor to generations of younger African Americans. Perhaps his most enduring philanthropic undertaking, though just one of many, has been his work over the years with De La Salle Academy, the only private school in New York City for academically talented, less advantaged children. Its mission is to offer students a life-changing educational experience. Sound familiar? Ray joined the board in the early 80s when the school was a startup without resources. As Brother Brian Carty told me in our phone call yesterday, Ray, quote, Ray believed in, the founder, Brother Brian Carty, Ray believed in us and in the mission. Anything I asked him for, he did. He never took credit, never took center stage. He led by example. Brian went on to say, Ray is a man of great talent, a presence in every room who thunderstruck others but always had great humility. He doesn't look for praise. He's a doer who brings people together, unquote. Brother Brian summed up the conversation by saying, without Ray, we would not be here. De La Salle, listen to this. De La Salle became a remarkable place. 100% of its students receive aid. 94% are children of color. 90% are first-generation American. 30% come from families with incomes under $30,000, annual incomes under $30,000. 98% attend college, and 93% graduate in 4 years. As a direct consequence of Ray's work with Brother Brian, there are literally thousands of previously underprivileged kids who are now young adults with college degrees and promising life prospects that they would not otherwise have had. Well done. Ray also became a prominent and pioneering art connoisseur who amassed a collection of African and African American art long before it was in vogue. He once remarked that as a child he would ride his bike past the Dayton Art Museum not aware of what was inside. As an adult, he became the longtime chairman of the Studio Museum in Harlem and a senior trustee of the Whitney Museum in Manhattan. He notably became mentor to generations of African Americans who followed him to Wall Street. Ray's office at Citibank and his apartment on Central Park West became mandatory stops on the career path of ambitious younger people in need of wisdom, encouragement, and inspiration. As Brother Brian put it to me, of all things Ray has accomplished, quote, that is a legacy beyond measure, unquote. Now, nobody's perfect. Ray did inexplicably become a Knicks fan. The Knicks? Really, Ray? If he couldn't root for the Celtics, at least he could pull for the Lakers, right, Kareem? But perhaps his stepson, Cole, who is now point guard for the Orlando Magic, can finally break that spell. Crystal, you're out there somewhere, right? Can we work on that? All right, good. And in my view, New York City's loss is at a loss now that Ray is not our mayor. But life is long, and maybe we can call him to public service again. Our society would be so much the better for it. In conclusion, it is our honor today to award the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal to Raymond J. McGuire. Hang on. Titan, humanist, connoisseur, mentor, and dear friend, and he still has a respectable jump shot. Truly a man for all seasons. Raymond.
President Bacow, it's great to see you. Thank you for your leadership and all that you have done to make certain that this great university remains at the forefront of that which takes place in the world of education. Glenn Hutchins, you do me great honor. What you have done in the world of business is iconic. What you have done in the world of scholarship has transformed the canon. What you have done for your friends, especially the least of thee, has prolonged and saved lives. I want to thank Professor Henry Louis Gates, Jr., who single-handedly placed African and African-American literature and culture in its rightful place as essential in the Academy. Your spotlight has illuminated civilization's major contributors who before your arrival were at best discounted and for the most part ignored. And I also want to thank my wife, who's here in the third row, Crystal, my better three-quarters. You make it all happen. And for Ella, who is a sophomore here, and for Leo, who's gone into the 4th grade, and for our son, Cole, you are why we are here. It is your love and support that continues to sustain us. So I'm honored to be here. I'm honored and humbled to be on the same stage as those whom I've long admired. These luminaries pronounce to the world that while not all is as it should be, there are those to whom we can point that show us the way. Each of you giants stands regal on the modern-day Mount Rushmore of civil rights and social justice. By the way, Mount Rushmore is not in South Dakota. In the limited time that I have here, I'm going to invoke a few of my closest friends. I'm going to start with that old Pentecostal preacher back home. I won't be long. Does anybody here know what I'm talking about? So I just stopped by to tell you. It's been a long journey since I had a 4.0 grade point average and averaged 28 points per game and was class president of the Miami Valley School in Dayton, Ohio. My then 11th grade teacher, Robin Melnick, said, if you're as good as they say you are, why don't you go test yourself against the big boys and girls in the East? At 16 years old, my family gathered a few dollars and I took a Greyhound bus around New England by myself looking for him. And I landed, as Glenn says, the Hutchins School. From there, I applied to 6 colleges and got into all 6 and entered the gates of Harvard. The journey from there to here has come full circle. As a freshman, I sat in this very hall and learned from the great Alfred B. Lord on oral and popular culture. I became an English major under the great Walter Jackson Bate and Jim Ingle. And I studied poetry, and then I went on and I grabbed a couple other degrees. Now, almost 40 years later, I am back in Sanders Theater. There is no Silicon Valley algorithm that could explain this, and Hollywood has yet to write the script. But it was written by the prayers of the faithful in the blanket of the Psalms, 91. Now, my education was made possible by, yes, my single mother who raised me with my grandparents in the neighborhood. I did not know my father, and she had a high school diploma, and my grandfather only reached 3rd grade. But Epictetus, the slave, the Greek philosopher, told us long ago that only the educated are free. So if this journey has been about anything, then it has been about that for which this institution that I love so deeply stands. And that's the closest I can get to explaining how it is that I got to this stage. But alas, this medal is not about me. It is about the hope and promise that it represents. It is about the kindergarten, 12th to 12th grade black and brown boys and girls across the country. It is about the state of their education. If it's not clear, it should be clear. I care a lot about words, and I choose them carefully. For those kids, their situation is not bad. It's grim. I'm sobered by the desperate realities of the economic, social, and educational divide that has unleashed a plague across urban America. These catastrophic inequities are given little attention, even fewer prescriptions. That's why 18 months ago I ran for the Democratic nomination for mayor of New York City. I'd lived and worked in the great metropolis for years, raised our family there. I knew the budget and couldn't understand why many in public housing still live with lead-filled pipes. I couldn't understand how, given all the wealth being created, that we're nearing Depression-era levels of food insecurity. I couldn't understand why the city was spending almost $28,000 a year to educate a child, and yet 8 out of 10 black and brown boys and girls between the grades of 3 and 8 read below grade level. And when the school year opens, parents are expected to pool their dollars to buy toilet paper and art supplies. Now contrast that with the yearly cost of supporting a black or brown inmate in Rikers Island, $430,000. $28,000 in no crayons. $430,000 in Little Hope. The governmental institutions that have both the money and responsibility to help are failing, and no one's holding them accountable. It was only after I stopped outsourcing solutions to politicians that I saw these injustices. And these injuries persist because too many people who go into public service are really in self-service. And these politicians, including many who look like me, have become the gatekeepers of poverty, standing guard as their constituents' lives descend into deplorable conditions. Without the alchemy of education and art, the most effective recruiting organization is the gang, which helps explain why the average age of the trigger puller in New York City is between 14 and 18 years old. The business community has been complicit, sitting on the sidelines. I look at this and I ask what the great William Wordsworth asked, whither's it fled, the visionary gleam? Where is it now, the glory and the dream? And I respect that these problems are complicated and deeply ingrained, but here's what the gatekeepers won't admit. They're all highly solvable. We need to invest in education early so that our children can learn to read and are prepared to read to learn. We need to invest in the neighborhood centers. We need to invest in 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. when these children are most vulnerable. And at this moment in time, on this hour, on this day, I hearken back to 1963, before the March on Washington, when Martin Luther King Jr. paid tribute to W.E.B. Du Bois, and he stated, the man needs to be remembered today when despair is all too prevalent. In the years Du Bois lived and fought, there was far more justification for frustration and hopelessness, and yet his faith in his people never wavered. King went on to say he confronted the establishment as a model of militant manhood and integrity. He defied them, and though they heaped venom and scorn on him, his powerful voice was never stilled. He exemplified black power and achievement. And so with Du Bois as my foundation and standing on the upright and unwavering shoulders of Vernon Jordan and Franklin A. Thomas and Clifford Alexander and David Evans and Leo and Mamie Wilson and my dear mother, Oletha McGuire, it is with humility and deep gratitude that I accept this medal. And as a poet said to me once, in my beginning is my end. As a holy man says at the start of every service, the grass may wither and the flowers may fade, but the glory of the Almighty lasts forever. Or as I learned in one of these classrooms years ago from my friend Langston Hughes, who told me then, as he tells me today, hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field frozen with snow. Hold fast to dreams. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Glenda Carpio, Chair of the English Department and Professor of African and African American Studies, and therefore colleague with my wonderful friend, esteemed Professor Gates. And it's my pleasure to read from one of his favorite passages from Du Bois's The Souls of Black Folk, 1903, from The Training of Black Men. I sit with Shakespeare, and he winces not. Along the color line I move, arm in arm with Balzac and Dumas, where smiling men and welcoming women glide in gilded halls. From out of the caves of evening that swing between the strong-limbed earth and the tracery of stars, I summon Aristotle and Aurelius, and what soul I will, and they come all graciously with no scorn or condescension. So wed with truth, I dwell above the veil. Is this the life you grudge us, O knightly America? Is this the life you long to change into the dull red hideousness of Georgia? Are you so afraid lest peering from this high Pisgah between Philistine and Amalekite, we sight the promised land? Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Tracy K. Smith. I am a faculty member in the departments of English and African American Studies. I've been sitting here feeling myself to be in the presence of holy beings, and then talking myself down and saying, no, these are people who have made extraordinary choices that we feel and learn from and aspire to serve in some way. And so I just want to say thank you. I'm moved and inspired by the words of gratitude, and I'm grateful to be part of this institution that is committed to honoring and making possible justice as something that's central to the mission. It's my honor to be presenting the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal to Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Adichie is one of the most celebrated writers of our time. I want to interrupt myself and say that Chimamanda is consecrated to the work of the word. which is soul work in a large and cosmic way. You have a vision that is large, but it begins in small, intimate, particular spaces. It is as attached to vocabularies of causes as it is to the dialect of the heart, let's say. And I believe your work reminds us of what it looks like to look around at the small and the vast, both in and around us. And I think that's what art does. It makes us small and large at the right times. Let me tell you about Chimamanda. Born in Nigeria and now dividing her time between there and the US, specifically Baltimore, Adichie is the author of 3 novels, Purple Hibiscus, Half of a Yellow Sun, and Americana. I knew I was going to hear that. As well as a short story collection, a book-length essay, a manifesto presented as Letters to a New Mother, and her most recent work, Notes on Grief, which is a lyrical and complex and vulnerable reflection on the death of her father. She's won numerous literary prizes, among them the Commonwealth Writers' Prize for Best First Book, the Orange Prize, the National Book Critics Circle Award. She's also the recipient of a MacArthur Genius Award. She's received more than a dozen honorary degrees and has held prestigious fellowships, including one right here at Harvard Radcliffe Institute in 2011 and 12. Her books have landed on syllabi across continents and have been selected for several One City, One Book reading programs. Sometimes I have a book that I love so much and feel is so important that I wish everybody, in a population would be given a copy of the book to read, which is precisely what happened when every 16-year-old in the country of Sweden was given one of Adichie's books. That was the book-length essay she wrote entitled "We Should All Be Feminists," which was published in 2015. It originated in a landmark TED Talk in 2012, and 3 years before that, she delivered her first landmark TED Talk, "The Dangers of a Single Story." We Should All Be Feminist launched her beyond the status of highly regarded novelist and into the stratosphere of public intellectual. The intensity of notice for this work was certainly helped along by Beyoncé sampling a line in her song Flawless, and it didn't hurt that Christian Dior created a t-shirt emblazoned with the title, which Rihanna was photographed wearing. So she became an icon of 21st century feminism for demanding that if equality is the goal, then we must honestly name one of the very real obstacles to genuine equality. She writes, "Some people ask, why the word feminist? Why not just say you're a believer in human rights or something like that? Because that would be dishonest. Feminism is, of course, part of human rights in general, but to choose to use the vague expression human rights is to deny the specific and particular problem of gender." Now, the conversation she sparked has been long and often difficult. And to all of the hundreds of students that are here with us today, I want to remind you that your task is to help carry this conversation forward by making use of the full measure of your gifts, your wisdom, intellect, courage, conscience, the particular contours of your own as yet lived experience, and your humility. For all of us are engaged in the mammoth and ongoing project of progress, and that's something that spans generations and geographies. It lives across constantly mutating vocabularies, and it's a project to which we are all, in our own way, urgently necessary. In her essays and talks, Adichie warns against the false comforts of a single story in a world that is roiling with conflicting and contradictory and reality-expanding stories, all distinct, all necessary. In her novels, Adichie has brought African voices to the attention of the wider world. She's cast African immigrant experience in stories that are once universally resonant and gloriously precise, particular to the worlds in which they are born. She is a superstar who is also part of an African literary renaissance in the company of my brilliant colleagues Teju Cole and Namwali Serpell that demands that we, each of us, work hard to understand the vast traffic of cultures, beliefs, and identities that swirl around and intersect with our own. Indeed, that we even ourselves contain. When Chimamanda spoke to Harvard's graduating seniors at Class Day in 2018, she said, "Make the human story the center of your understanding of the world. Think of people, not as abstractions who have to conform to bloodless logic, but as people, fragile, imperfect, with pride that can be wounded and hearts that can be touched." For your tremendous literary gifts, for your fierce commitment to moving humanity beyond the constraints of a single story, a single vocabulary, a single set of expectations, we recognize you, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, with the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal.
I'm not crying. Tracy K. Smith, thank you for, where's Tracy? Tracy is a goddess of literature, and I am so moved by her introduction, just so moved that it's her who gets to introduce me. I think we first met years ago at Princeton, and I followed Tracy's work since I actually found comfort in your memoir when I was dealing with the immediate aftermath of my own grief. And your poetry has just always, to me, seemed able to do that incredible feat of being both really cerebral and also deeply emotional. Thank you, Tracy. And it's such an honor for me to be on the stage today. It's such an honor for me to be honored by the Du Bois, to get this W.E.B. Du Bois Medal for so many reasons. And I want to start with the first one. And the first reason is actually a man seated here on the stage who I call my Uncle Skip, who is also known as Professor Henry Louis Gates Jr. I just want to say thank you to you, because I think it's so important to give people their flowers, preferably publicly. Uncle Skip is such an icon, but it's really for your work. You have made African American history, African American literature mainstream, normal, as it should be. And what moves me even more is that you understand the largeness of the Black experience. you understand how we're all connected. You understand that in America and in the Black diaspora, in Africa, we're Black in different ways, but we are all Black. And I deeply appreciate you. You've had just the most incredible experiences, and we all know that he has had the good fortune of attending many conferences, including the Beer Summit. I won't say anything more about that. I have a lot to say about that, I won't. I have family here, and the reason I want to talk about two members of my family who are here is that in many ways they are part of my story of being here on this stage. I left Nigeria to go to come here to the US to go to college because I was fleeing the study of medicine. I had been in medical school for a year in Nigeria because, in Nigeria, if you do well in school, everybody just tells you you have to be a doctor, and you find yourself just going along with it, even though you know that you want nothing less. The last thing you want in your life is to be a doctor. So I did go into medical school, and after a year, I had to flee. Not only because I was writing little bits of stories at the backs of my anatomy textbooks, but also just because I knew that I was made to tell stories. That's the thing that really meant the most to me was telling stories. But the reason that I could come to the US is that I happened to have a family member who already was in the US, my sister Rosemary, who is here, and her husband Obi, who is also here. So Rosemary and Obi were willing to give me food and a bed to sleep on, which some things that one might require in order to live. And so that in some ways they made it possible for me to come to the US. And had I not left Nigeria to come to the US, I think I would still have kept writing because I had it all figured out, actually. I had imagined that I would study psychiatry and that I would then see patients during the day, and that at night I would then use the stories my patients had told me to write my fiction. But even that wasn't consolation enough, so I really had to flee. And I'm just really grateful to my family for their support. My little brother Kene is here, and also my sister and brother-in-law's son, my nephew Tokes. And I must tell you that when I called Tokes to ask if he would like to come, and I said, this is a big deal, I'm very excited about it, he said, Auntie, I don't know. Then I said, well, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is going to be there. And then he's like, what time, Auntie? So, Mr. Abdul-Jabbar, I hope you'll give him the honor of a photograph at some point. Writing is the love of my life, and literature has mattered to me for so long, and it's always so meaningful for me to have my work recognized. It never gets old. I love selling books. There is that house in Nigeria that I want to buy, but the most meaningful thing for me as a writer is to know that I can create something that means something to other people. And so what moves me the most is to hear from people who have read me and who say, your work made me feel seen. Your work made me think differently. Your work made me feel that I was not alone. And so I'm so grateful for this award because, again, it just makes me think that what I am doing matters. And it's a gift. It's a gift to feel that what you're doing matters. And for the young people who are here, if you care about anything, please care about reading. Reading is so important. Reading is magical. Books are magical. And I really think that one of the best ways to counter what seems to me to be a just really ugly tsunami of book bannings going around in this country is to read. The only way that we can answer to censorship of books is to read books. And so for you young people, I just want to make a very small suggestion. How about you give up social media for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, and read. Thank you so much. This has been such an honor for me.
Hello, my name is Larry Bacow, and as president of Harvard, I just want to say to each and every one of our awardees, you honor all of us in this room. You honor this university by your presence. You also inspire us by your achievements. To all of you, thank you. I have the privilege of introducing our final awardee. This is a brave man. He is brave for his willingness to speak out against injustice wherever he sees it. He is a brave man for his willingness to stand up for racial equality, which our society demands of us. He's willing to speak of the beauty and the richness of the culture of his faith at a time in which it was not popular to do so. And he is a brave man for his willingness to come to Boston where the fans used to routinely shout and chant, "Beat LA," to receive an award made possible by the generosity of one of the owners of the Boston Celtics. He is also a towering figure, literally, in the annals of athletics. The NBA's all-time leading scorer, a 19-time All-Star, and the league's only 6-time MVP. This is a man who has captured the imaginations and fueled the aspirations of generations of admirers, imitators, and fans, including this president. Off the basketball court, he has accomplished even more than he has on it. Friends and colleagues, please join me in welcoming to a rival city the unmistakable, the unstoppable, the extraordinary Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I'm not done yet. Okay. Stay here. I'm not done yet. Stay here for a second. Sit down. I am far from done. There's a lot more to say about you, Kareem.
You want to go back and sit down again?
You can sit right here in my chair if you want. It's actually nice to be president of Harvard. They're looking for a new one. Those of us who have followed his life closely know that Kareem's athletic prowess and skill, his signature skyhook, are just part of his extraordinary legacy. Or as he, in his own words, has famously quipped, "I can do more than stuff a basketball through a hoop. My greatest asset is my mind." A powerful writer, on systemic injustices and inequities, he penned an impassioned op-ed for the Los Angeles Times following George Floyd's murder. It reached more than 3 million readers. Racism in America, he wrote, is like dust in the air. It seems invisible, even if you're choking on it, until you let the sun in. Then you see it everywhere. As long as we keep shining that light, we have the chance of cleaning it wherever it lands. But we have to stay vigilant because it is always in the air. That image of dust in the air, of the constant effort to see it and clear it, is present in so much of his own philanthropic work. The organization he founded and directs, the Skyhook Foundation, brings educational STEAM activities to underserved communities through outdoor environmental learning. Its flagship program, Camp Skyhook, offers these enriching activities to 4th and 5th graders in the Los Angeles Unified School District, the second largest public school district in the United States. Through its programming, the foundation practices what Kareem has preached for years now, that education is the most basic of all social justice issues, and a societal investment in education is an investment in individual students, their families, their communities, and yes, in this country. It's no wonder that our distinguished guest was presented with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, our nation's highest civilian honor, in 2016. I don't know that there's a better summary of his achievements than the one offered by President Barack Obama. And I have to note here, someone who talked a lot of trash and sort of was a decent basketball player, at least measured by the standards of the Harvard Law School Intramural League. And I quote President Obama, "The reason we honor Kareem is more than just a pair of goggles and the skyhook. He stood up for his Muslim faith when it wasn't easy and it wasn't popular. He's as comfortable sparring with Bruce Lee as he is advocating on Capitol Hill or writing with extraordinary eloquence about patriotism. Physically, intellectually, spiritually, Kareem is one of a kind, an American who illuminated both our most basic freedoms and our highest aspirations," in the words of President Obama. In my words now, thank you, Kareem, for bringing light to our lives, light to American life. You changed our idea of what the game of basketball could be, enlarging and shaping possibilities for those who came after you. You've done the same for our vision of the United States, opening our eyes to where we can go and what we must leave behind. You embody greatness achieved through practice, immortality achieved through action. On behalf of Harvard University, it is my honor to present you with the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal. Congratulations.
thank you so much for that very kind reception. And I'd also like to thank Harvard University and Professor Henry Louis Gates for making this possible. I never thought I'd be here. I was here once before, though. Early 70s, I took a semester of Arabic under Dr. Bashai. He was great. But I just want to thank everyone involved in this for making this possible. It's amazing. 15 years ago, I wrote a book called On the Shoulders of Giants, in which I discussed my journey through the Harlem Renaissance. In it, I detailed how, as a high school student studying journalism, I started to study the Harlem Renaissance. It was an awakening for me because before that I'd learned very little about the achievements of black artists, writers, athletes, and political activists. My Catholic high school didn't see that as a priority in the classroom. Neither did most classrooms across America. One Harlem voice in particular had a great impact on me because his voice spoke to the deepest part of who I was as an African American. Before then, the voices that I listened to were jazz music. The notes of Miles Davis and Thelonious Monk spoke directly to me on an emotional level. They taught me what it felt like to be black. But W.E.B. Du Bois made me achieve the words to express what I was thinking about with regard to being black. And what I wanted to do with those thoughts and probably my feelings also, going forward. In the 1980s, my daughter Habiba was in Ireland as part of an exchange student program. And when she came back, she asked me if I had ever heard of John Alcindor, the first black doctor in England. I hadn't. Thinking that the name was just a coincidence, I quickly forgot about it. After all, Alcindor had been the slave owner of my family. So he probably passed the name on to many black people. "50 years pass much too quickly, if you ask me. And my son Kareem tells me he's done some research on genealogy, and this website, he discovered that Dr. John Alcindor was my great uncle. He was my father's uncle. It's always a joy to discover your ancestor was someone of great humanitarian accomplishment and not the person who invented the chicken dance. My great uncle had a long history of service despite facing terrible discrimination. When World War I broke out, he volunteered to go with the British expeditionary forces, but they rejected him, and they used the excuse of the fact that he had a colonial origin. It is to his great credit that he still wanted to help the very country that had just insulted him. He volunteered for the Red Cross and was later awarded a Red Cross medal for his life-saving work. In 2014, Dr. Alcindor was honored with a plaque that was unveiled before national television cameras. The plaque read, Dr. John Alcindor, 1873 to 1924, physician, Pan-Africanist, and World War I local hero. And that was what the people of England thought of him. In his commitment to Pan-African ideals that brought my great uncle and W.E.B. Du Bois together, Pan-Africanists fought to end the disparity and racism resulting from European colonialism in Africa and the West Indies. I did a little digging around and found out that Dr. Alcindor had corresponded with Dr. Du Bois in order to make preparation for his coming to London to attend the Third Pan-African Congress of 1921. Some of those letters are now in Dr. Du Bois' archive. And to me, that's amazing. As a result of that Congress, Dr. Du Bois wrote this in his manifesto to the League of Nations. If we are coming to recognize that the great modern problem is to correct maladjustment in the distribution of wealth, it must be remembered that the basic maladjustment is in the outrageously unjust distribution of world income between the dominant and suppressed peoples. That same statement could just as easily have been written today. The Federal Reserve stated that the top 1% of households in the United States held 32.3% of the country's wealth, while the bottom 50% held 2.6%. During our struggles with COVID-19, that disparity only increased. I mention this because it's important that we keep alive the spirit of Dr. Du Bois, not just by honoring his name, but by continuing his fight for equality for all people. Although I didn't know Dr. Alcindor, it brings me great pleasure to think that he would be proud that I carried on the family tradition of speaking out for social justice. I came up with the title of my book about the Harlem Renaissance from a quote by Sir Isaac Newton, who put his own achievements in historical context by saying, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Today, I can say that if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of Dr. John Alcindor and Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. This medal culminates a relationship between our families that began 100 years ago. Thank you so much.
Please join me once again in saluting the 2022 recipients of the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal. On behalf of President Bacow, Glenn Hutchins, and Henry Louis Gates, Jr., I thank you for sharing in this very special occasion. As we close, let us receive a benediction, and if you are able, you may stand. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to finish tonight with the glorious Kuumba Singers. Good night to all. Thank you for coming.